The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a massive dome under the artificial stars of Nexus Prime. 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each group separated by barriers of light that filtered their native atmospheres. The air hummed with translation devices, working overtime to convert thousands of different languages into something everyone could understand. Jin Park stood alone in the center of it all. The human ambassador wore a simple black suit, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked calm, almost peaceful, as hundreds of alien eyes stared down at him. Some of those eyes glowed with hate. Others showed disappointment. A few held what might have been sadness. High above on the judgment platform, Council Leader Thexvar clicked his mandibles together. The insectoid, Zephyrian's voice echoed through the chamber like grinding metal. Human Representative Jin Park, Thexvar began. Your species stands accused of aggressive expansion into restricted space. You have built colonies in 17 systems that were marked as off-limits to primitive civilizations. Jin said nothing. He just nodded slightly. Furthermore, continued another council member, a floating jellyfish-like creature from the void reaches, humanity has repeatedly refused to accept proper hierarchy within galactic civilization. You treat advanced species as equals. You negotiate instead of obeying. A third voice joined in. This one belonged to Ambassador Veltar, a 7-foot-tall reptilian, with green scales that shifted color with his emotions. Right now, those scales showed deep purple, the color of disappointment among his kind. We offered humanity junior membership status, Veltar said, his forked tongue flicking out with each word. We offered protection, guidance, and slow integration into galactic society. Your species rejected every offer. Jin finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear, carrying easily through the vast chamber. We did reject those offers, he said. Humanity prefers to stand as equals, not as servants. The reaction was immediate. Angry clicks, hisses, and electronic screeches filled the air. Several council members rose from their seats, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the flood of outraged responses. Equals. Thexvar's mandibles spread wide in what humans had learned was extreme anger among Zephyrians. Your species mastered faster than light travel only 200 years ago. The Zephyrian Empire has ruled space for over 10,000 years. The Kelari have been trading between stars since before your planet had complex life. How dare you claim equality? Because we are equals, Jin replied simply. Not in age, not in experience, but in dignity. Every thinking being deserves respect, regardless of how long their civilization has existed. The council chamber erupted again. This time, Thexvar had to activate the silence field to restore order. When the angry buzzing and clicking finally stopped, he leaned forward on his platform. This is exactly the arrogance we speak of, he said. Humanity refuses to learn its place. You expand without permission. You share technology with species we have deemed unready. You interfere in conflicts that are none of your concern. We help where we can, Jin said. We trade freely with anyone willing to trade with us. We defend ourselves when attacked. These seem like reasonable actions. Reasonable? The voice came from the Vorthak section. General Krell-Sox, a creature that looked like an armored bear with 6 arms, stood up to his full 9-foot height. Your species has military technology that rivals our own, despite having no right to such power. Your defensive systems have made several of our member species feel threatened. Jin's expression didn't change. No human ship has ever fired the first shot in any conflict. We have never invaded another species' territory. We have never demanded tribute or forced anyone to obey our laws. But you refuse to obey ours, Thexvar said, clicking his mandibles again. The council leader activated a holographic display that showed a map of known space. Human colonies appeared as small blue dots, scattered across dozens of systems. As the council members watched, those dots began flashing red. By unanimous vote of the Galactic Council, Thexvar announced, humanity is hereby banished from galactic civilization. All human colonies must be evacuated within 30 standard cycles. All human ships must return to your home system of Sol. Any human found outside that system after the deadline will be considered a hostile invader. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the translation devices seemed to quiet down. Every eye focused on Jin Park, waiting for his response. Many expected anger, or pleading, or desperate offers to negotiate. Instead, Jin nodded slowly. "We understand," he said. His voice remained calm, almost relieved. "Humanity will comply with the Council's decision." Several council members exchanged surprised glances. This was not the reaction they had expected. "Furthermore," Jin continued, "we want to thank the Council for this lesson." "Lesson?" Thexvar's mandibles twitched in confusion. "Yes," Jin said, turning to look around the entire chamber. "You've taught us something valuable about the nature of galactic civilization, about the importance of independence, about what happens when cooperation is mistaken for weakness." The human ambassador reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. He set it on the floor and pressed a button. A hologram appeared, showing Earth's blue marble surface rotating slowly. "In 30 cycles, every human will be back in Sol system," Jin said. "We will take nothing that belongs to other species. We will leave behind nothing that belongs to humanity, and we will remember this day." He picked up the device and walked toward the chamber's exit. As he reached the great doors, he turned back one final time. "We came to the stars hoping to find friends," Jin said. "Instead, we found masters and servants. We chose not to be either." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. In the silence that followed, some council members began to feel the first stirrings of doubt. Had they just made a terrible mistake? But those doubts were quickly pushed aside. Humanity was gone from galactic politics. The natural order would be restored. The council would be stronger than ever. At least, that's what they told themselves as they watched the human ambassador's ship disappear into hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's banishment back to Earth. None of them noticed the small smile that had crossed Jin Park's face just before the chamber doors closed. The message reached every human colony within hours. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the research vessel, Discovery. Watching the holographic display showed Jin Park's calm face as he delivered the news. "The Galactic Council has spoken," Jin said in the recording. "All human colonies must be evacuated within 30 cycles. We are going home." Sarah turned to her science officer, Dr. Kim Nakamura, who was staring at the message with wide eyes. 30 cycles, Kim whispered. "That's barely 2 months. How can we evacuate 200 colonies in 2 months?" "We don't evacuate," Sarah said quietly. "We withdraw. There's a difference." Across human space, the same conversation was happening on hundreds of worlds. But the reactions weren't what the Galactic Council expected. There was no panic, no desperate protests, no attempts to negotiate. Instead, there was something that might have surprised the Council's members. Relief. On New Geneva, the most advanced human research world, Dr. Marcus Webb looked around his laboratory one last time. The quantum computing arrays that had taken 20 years to build hummed quietly in their protective fields. These machines could process calculations that would take the galaxy's best computers centuries to complete. "Pack it all up," he told his team. "Everything. Every circuit. Every memory core. Every theoretical framework." "Sir," one of his assistants said hesitantly. "The Council said, we could leave our infrastructure behind. Other species might benefit from our research." Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Council made it very clear that they see us as primitive upstarts who don't deserve equality." Why would we leave gifts for people who consider us inferior? The same scene played out across human space. On mining worlds, the automated extraction systems were carefully dismantled. On agricultural planets, the genetic templates for enhanced crops were deleted from all databases. On industrial centers, the manufacturing facilities were stripped down to bare metal. It wasn't destruction, it was removal. Every piece of human technology, every scientific advancement, every innovation that had made human colonies so successful, all of it was packed up and shipped back toward Earth. Captain Lisa Chen commanded the cargo fleet that evacuated the Tau Ceti system. As her ships loaded the last components from the orbital factories, she received a transmission from Kalari trader Velmoth. Captain Chen, the trader's translated voice sounded worried. Surely you're not taking the hyperspace beacon generators? The trade routes through this system depend on those beacons. Lisa looked at the massive cylindrical devices being loaded into her ship's cargo bay. The beacons created stable corridors through hyperspace, making fast travel possible. Without them, journey times between systems would increase by weeks. The beacons are human technology, Lisa replied. We built them, we maintain them, and now we're taking them home. But the trade routes. We'll have to find another way, Lisa said, cutting off the transmission. On the agricultural world of New Eden, the evacuation was watched by a delegation of Nithan observers. The peaceful, bird-like creatures had been humanity's closest allies in this sector. Their leader, a female named Swiftwing, approached the human colony administrator as the last transport lifted off. We don't understand, Swiftwing chirped through her translator. The council says you were aggressive, but you always protected our shipping from pirates. You shared your medical technology when the plague struck our world. Why does the council see this as wrong? Administrator Park, Jin's younger brother, loaded the final data core into his personal transport. Because we treated you as equals instead of subjects, he said sadly. The council prefers a galaxy where everyone knows their place in the hierarchy. And what was humanity's place supposed to be? Somewhere near the bottom, I think. Just above species that haven't achieved spaceflight yet. Swiftwing's feathers ruffled with distress. But your technology, your science, your military capabilities, you're clearly one of the most advanced species we've encountered. Advancement isn't about technology, Park replied. It's about wisdom. And apparently, the council thinks we lack wisdom because we refuse to bow to their authority. As Park's transport prepared to leave, Swiftwing called out one last question. What will we do without your protection? Park paused at the transport's entrance. You'll learn to protect yourselves. You always could. We just made it easier for you to avoid learning. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. The Keelari watched their trade networks begin to fragment as human-built hyperspace infrastructure went dark. The Vorthak military leadership initially celebrated the removal of human interference from local conflicts until they realized how much they had relied on human tactical innovations. On Nexus Prime, Council leader Thexvar received reports of the human withdrawal with satisfaction. The humans were being remarkably cooperative. No protests, no attempts to hide assets, no guerrilla warfare. They were simply packing up and leaving, exactly as ordered. See? He told the other council members during an emergency session. This proves they were not as powerful as they pretended. Truly dangerous species would fight such a decree. The humans submit like the primitives they are. But Ambassador Veltar, the reptilian diplomat who had worked most closely with human representatives, felt a growing unease. In his experience, humans never simply submitted to anything. They negotiated, they compromised, they found creative solutions. Something feels wrong about this, he told his aide as they watched shipping reports showing human assets flowing steadily toward the Sol system. They're too calm, too organized. It's almost like they were prepared for this. Prepared for banishment? Prepared for independence, Veltar corrected. His scales shifted to a worried yellow. What if we just gave them exactly what they wanted? As the 30th cycle approached, the last human ship departed from the former colony of New Horizon. Captain James Rodriguez looked back at the empty orbital stations and abandoned surface facilities. In 30 days, humanity had removed every trace of their presence from 200 worlds. Message for you from Earth Command, his communications officer reported. Rodriguez activated the secure channel. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen. All colonies evacuated ahead of schedule, she reported. Total assets recovered. 100%. Not a single scrap of human technology left behind. Good, Rodriguez replied. And the special projects? All personnel and equipment safely transferred to the hidden facilities. Project Independence is ready to begin the next phase. Rodriguez smiled. The Council wanted us gone from their space. They never said anything about the space beyond their borders. As his ship entered hyperspace toward Earth, Rodriguez wondered if the Council had any idea what they had actually accomplished. They thought they were banishing a troublesome junior member from their civilization. Instead, they had just freed humanity to become something else entirely. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the dark space around Sol System. On Nexus Prime, Council leader Thexvar stood before the great holographic display that showed the current state of galactic civilization. What he saw made his mandibles click with growing concern. Report, he ordered his aide, a nervous Kelari named Wektar whose fur was shifting between worried gray and fearful white. Trade volume down 18% across all major routes, Wektar said, his voice shaking slightly. Hyperspace transit times increased by an average of 43%. Mining output in former human sectors has dropped by 68%. Explain, Thexvar demanded. The humans took their beacon network with them, Wektar replied. Without those navigation aids, ships have to take much longer routes through hyperspace, and the automated mining systems they left behind have all shut down. They required human maintenance codes that we don't have. On the other side of the chamber, Ambassador Veltar listened to the report with growing dread. His scales had been stuck in worried yellow for weeks now, ever since the first problems had started appearing. What about security issues? Thexvar asked. Another aide stepped forward, this one a insectoid Zephyrian military officer. Pirate activity has increased by 200% in the former human territories. The Nithan shipping lanes are particularly hard hit, but those systems should be better defended now, Thexvar said, confused. The humans were always interfering with our peacekeeping efforts. The humans weren't interfering, the military officer replied reluctantly. They were doing most of the actual peacekeeping. Their patrol ships covered sectors that would have required entire Vorthak battle fleets to monitor properly. Thexvar's mandibles spread in anger. Are you saying the Vorthak military can't handle simple pirates? The Vorthak military is designed for large-scale warfare between species, the officer explained carefully. The humans specialized in small unit tactics and rapid response. They could stop pirate raids with a single ship. We need a dozen vessels to do the same job, and we don't have enough ships to cover all the areas they used to patrol. In the medical bay of a Kalari trading station, Dr. Samara worked frantically over her patient. The Nithan child had been injured in a pirate attack, and the damage was severe. Under normal circumstances, she would have used human-designed medical nanobots to repair the internal injuries. The tiny machines could fix damage at the cellular level with precision no other technology could match. But the nanobots required human-manufactured components that were no longer available. The synthesis chambers that produced them had all been removed when the humans left. Dr. Samara was forced to use older, cruder methods that would leave the child permanently disabled. Why did they take everything? She whispered to herself as she worked. Even the medical technology that could save lives? 3 sectors away, Captain Rex Vorthak led a patrol of 6 Vorthak heavy cruisers through what had once been human space. His mission was simple: establish Vorthak authority in the region and show the local species that the Council could maintain order without human interference. It wasn't going well. Contact bearing 2-7 Mark IV, his sensor operator reported. Configuration unknown. Rex studied the readings. The ship was smaller than his cruisers, but was moving at speeds that should have been impossible for a vessel that size. Its hull composition didn't match any known species technology. Transmit surrender demands, Rex ordered. No response, sir. The contact is accelerating. Rex watched in disbelief as the unknown ship pulled away from his entire squadron as if they were standing still. Worse, his own ships were struggling to maintain pursuit. The high-speed chase was pushing their engines beyond safe limits, causing system failures throughout the fleet. How are they doing that? Rex demanded. Unknown, sir. Their propulsion system doesn't match our databases. Rex was forced to break off the chase when 2 of his ships suffered engine overloads. As his fleet limped back to base, he couldn't shake the feeling that the unknown ship's technology had seemed familiar somehow. On the industrial world of Vector Prime, the Kalari government was facing a crisis. The planet's manufacturing sector depended on rare materials that had been supplied exclusively by human mining operations. With those operations shut down, critical shortages were beginning to appear. We could try to restart the mining systems ourselves, suggested the planet's industrial minister during an emergency council meeting. With what expertise? Replied the economic minister, her fur standing on end with stress. The humans took all their technical personnel with them. The mining facilities use technology we don't understand. Our attempts to restart them have only resulted in expensive equipment failures. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the research station Alpha Centauri, scientists struggled to maintain experiments that had depended on human-provided quantum computing resources. On the trade hub of New Kellara, shipping delays caused by the missing beacon network had created massive supply bottlenecks. But perhaps the most serious problem was developing on the independent world of Kethvar, where local species had begun to question Council authority directly. The humans never demanded tribute from us, declared Kethvar's planetary leader during a public broadcast that was being monitored throughout the galaxy. They traded fairly, they protected our shipping, and they respected our sovereignty. Now the Council tells us we must pay taxes to support their peacekeeping efforts while pirates raid our colonies unopposed. This is sedition. Vexvar snarled when the broadcast reached Nexus Prime. Deploy a fleet to restore order immediately. But when the Council fleet arrived at Kethvar, they found the planet defended by a coalition of 12 minor species who had banded together for mutual protection. The rebels had somehow acquired advanced defensive technology that the Council forces couldn't penetrate. Where did they get those shield generators? Admiral Krell Sox demanded, after his fleet was forced to retreat. The technology is definitely not Council standard, his tactical officer reported. But it's familiar somehow. The power signatures match some of the readings we got from human defensive systems. And impossible, Krell Sox replied. All the technology we knew about, the tactical officer corrected quietly. Back on Nexus Prime, Council leader Thexvar called an emergency session. The Great Chamber was filled with worried representatives from across the galaxy, all reporting similar problems in their regions. This is a temporary adjustment period, Thexvar announced, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Galactic civilization is simply adapting to the absence of human interference. Order will be restored. But Ambassador Veltar wasn't so sure. As the session ended, he made his way to his private office and activated a secure communication channel. The screen remained blank. He was trying to contact the Sol system, but had received no response from Earth for months. Computer, he said quietly. Analyze all reported incidents of unknown technology and unusual tactical capabilities over the past 6 months. The analysis took several minutes. When it finished, Veltar stared at the results with growing horror. Every major problem facing the Council could be traced back to the absence of human involvement. Trade routes that humans had maintained. Conflicts that humans had mediated. Technologies that humans had provided. The Galactic Council hadn't banished a primitive species. They had banished the invisible foundation that had been holding their civilization together. And somewhere in the dark space around Earth, humanity was watching the chaos unfold in absolute silence. 2 years after the banishment, the Galactic Council faced a crisis unlike anything in their recorded history. In the emergency session chamber on Nexus Prime, representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence as the reports poured in. 17 systems in open rebellion, announced the intelligence coordinator, a multi-armed Draconis whose scales were dull with exhaustion. Trade networks have collapsed in 3 major sectors. Pirate fleets now control territory that was once considered the safest space in the galaxy. Council leader Thexvar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his kind. How is this possible? We are the most advanced civilizations in known space. A few minor species and some pirates cannot threaten galactic order. They aren't minor anymore, replied Ambassador Veltar, his reptilian form hunched with defeat. His scales showed the deep purple of mourning. The rebellion includes the Nithans, the Kalari frontier colonies, 6 Althorian crystal worlds, and most of the independent systems that were under human protection. General Krelsox, the massive Vorthak military leader, stood up from his reinforced seat. My fleets can crush any rebellion. Give me authorization to use maximum force. Your fleets already tried that, Veltar reminded him coldly. The rebels have defensive technology that stops our weapons. Their ships move faster than ours. Their tactics are more advanced than anything in our databases. Impossible, Krelsox growled. Where could primitives get such technology? The answer came from an unexpected source. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display activated without authorization. The image that appeared was startling. A tall, crystalline being, with faceted features that reflected light in impossible patterns. I am speaker for the Althorian Assembly, the being announced in a voice like singing crystal. We have decided to clarify certain misunderstandings. Thexvar leaned forward, his mandibles spread in anger. The Althorian crystals have been allied with this council for 3,000 years. Why are you now supporting rebels? The Althorian crystals. The Althorian crystals have the Althorian. We were never allied with your council, the Althorian replied calmly. We were allied with humanity. When you banished them, you broke the only treaty that mattered to us. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The Althorians were among the most advanced species in the galaxy, masters of energy, manipulation, and defensive technology. Their alliance had been considered one of the Council's greatest strengths. For 50 years, humanity served as intermediary between our species and your Council, the Althorian continued. They understood that we valued different things than you. They respected our desire for isolation, while facilitating the limited cooperation we found beneficial. Through them, we shared certain technologies that helped maintain galactic stability. The defensive shields, Veltar whispered in realization. The rebels are using Althorian technology. Technology that was always meant to protect the peaceful from the aggressive. The crystal being confirmed. The humans understood this. Your council does not. General Krelsox slammed his 6 fists on his table. This is treason. The Althorians must be forced to comply with council authority. The hologram turned toward the Vorthok general, and for a moment the crystal being's light grew blindingly bright. Forced? General, your fleets cannot penetrate our defenses. Your weapons cannot harm our worlds. Your understanding of physics is thousands of years behind our own. What force could you possibly use against us? The truth of that statement settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. The Althorians had always been friendly, but distant. The Council had assumed they were simply peaceful. Now it was becoming clear that their peacefulness was a choice, not a necessity. Why reveal this now? Thexvar asked. Because this Council's actions have shown us the wisdom of human philosophy, the Althorian replied. They taught us that true civilization is not about who has the most weapons or the oldest empire. It is about who protects the weak, who respects diversity, and who builds up others instead of tearing them down. The hologram disappeared, leaving the Council in shocked silence. 3 days later, a desperate plan was formed. If the humans were somehow behind the galactic chaos, then the humans would have to be contacted. A fleet of the Council's fastest ships was dispatched toward the Sol system with orders to negotiate humanity's return to galactic civilization. Admiral Tekvor commanded the Council fleet as it approached the outer edge of the Sol system. The Zephyrian naval officer had served for over 2 centuries, but nothing in his experience prepared him for what he found. Admiral, his sensor operator reported, voice shaking with disbelief. I'm reading massive structures throughout the outer system. They appear to be defensive platforms. On the main display, Sol system appeared as it had never been seen before. Between the orbit of Jupiter and the orbit of Pluto, hundreds of enormous structures floated in space. They were clearly artificial, but their design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. How many platforms? Tekvor asked. Over 3,000 detected so far, sir. Each one is approximately the size of a heavy cruiser. Power readings are impossible. Impossible how? They're each generating more power than our entire fleet combined, sir. Tekvor stared at the display in growing horror. In 2 years, humanity had built a defensive network that could probably stop every fleet in the galaxy simultaneously. How was that possible? Croat. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. On screen. The image that appeared showed a human female wearing a simple military uniform. Her name tag read, Admiral Chen. Behind her, the bridge of her ship was filled with technology that looked decades ahead of anything the Council possessed. Council fleet, Admiral Chen said calmly. You are entering the Sol Defense Zone. State your business. I am Admiral Tekvor of the Galactic Council. Tekvor replied, trying to keep his voice steady. We wish to negotiate with humanity's leadership regarding their return to galactic civilization. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, there was something that might have been amusement in her voice. Return to galactic civilization? She repeated. Admiral, we were never part of your civilization. We tried to be, but you made it clear that we weren't welcome as equals. So we chose a different path. The galaxy needs human assistance. Tekvor said desperately. There are rebellions, pirates, economic collapse? Yes, Admiral Chen interrupted. We're aware. We've been watching. Then you'll help restore order? Admiral Chen's expression hardened. Admiral, your council spent decades trying to force humanity into submission. You demanded that we accept inferior status in a hierarchy based on age rather than merit. When we refused, you banished us from space that we had as much right to as anyone. We made mistakes. You made choices, Chen corrected. And now, you're living with the consequences. The galaxy you tried to build was unsustainable, without someone doing the actual work of maintaining peace and prosperity. You just never realized that the humans you dismissed as primitive were the ones keeping everything running. Tekvor felt cold dread settling in his chest. What do you want from us? Admiral Chen smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. We don't want anything from you, Admiral. You've already given us the greatest gift possible. What gift? Freedom to become what we were always meant to be. The transmission ended, leaving the Council fleet alone in the dark between the stars, surrounded by humanity's silent watchers. 5 years had passed since humanity's banishment, and the galaxy was unrecognizable. What had once been a unified civilization under council rule was now a collection of warring factions, failed states, and lawless territories. On Nexus Prime, the Great Council Chamber stood nearly empty. Only 12 species still attended regular sessions, down from the original 47. Council leader Thexvar looked older, his once shiny mandibles now dull with age and stress. The reports in front of him painted a picture of complete civilizational collapse. Economic output was down 70% galaxy-wide. Interstellar trade had virtually ceased in many sectors. Entire species had retreated to their homeworlds, abandoning their colonies to pirates and raiders. "We have no choice," announced Ambassador Veltar, his scales permanently fixed in the gray of despair. "We must formally request human intervention." "Never," snarled General Krellsox, though his voice lacked its former strength. The Vorthak military had suffered defeat after defeat against rebels equipped with advanced technology. "We are the Galactic Council. We do not beg primitives for help." "General," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance, "I think you misunderstand the situation." Every head turned to see a human figure walking down the central aisle. It was Jin Park, looking exactly as he had 5 years ago when he had stood in this same chamber to receive humanity's banishment. But now he was not alone. Behind him walked representatives from dozens of species that had broken away from council authority. "You," Thexvar whispered, his mandibles clicking with shock. "How did you get here?" "Our security." "Your security exists only in council-controlled space," Jin replied calmly. "Which, as of this morning, includes only this system and 7 others." The human ambassador walked to the center of the chamber, the same spot where he had received humanity's sentence years before. But now he stood with confidence, surrounded by allies instead of facing enemies alone. "The Galactic Council is hereby dissolved," Jin announced. "By unanimous agreement of 39 independent species and the Human Federation. This body no longer has the authority to govern galactic civilization." "Impossible," Thexvar protested. "You cannot simply dissolve the council. We are the rightful government of this galaxy." "Rightful government is based on consent of the governed," Jin replied. "And the governed have withdrawn their consent. The Nithan Republic, the Kalari Federation, the Althorian Assembly, and dozens of other civilizations have chosen a different path." General Krellsox rose to his full height, his 6 arms reaching for the weapons at his sides. "This is rebellion. The Vorthak military will restore order." He never drew his weapons. In an instant, he found himself surrounded by a shimmering energy field that prevented any movement. Similar fields appeared around every remaining council member. "The Vorthak military surrendered 3 days ago," said a new voice. Admiral Sarah Chen stepped into the chamber, wearing a uniform that bore insignia unfamiliar to the council members. "General Krellsox, you are the last Vorthak officer who has not accepted the transition agreement." Krellsox stared at her in disbelief. "Surrendered? To whom?" "To reality," Chen replied simply. "Your fleets were outmatched. Your supply lines were cut, and your people were tired of fighting for a cause they no longer believed in." Around the chamber, holographic displays activated showing the current state of the galaxy. What the council members saw was shocking. Systems that had been in chaos for years now showed stable governments, restored trade routes, and peaceful shipping lanes. The rebellious territories were no longer in rebellion. They were thriving independent states. "How?" Veltar whispered. "By doing what we always did," Jin answered. "We helped where help was needed. We protected those who could not protect themselves. We facilitated trade and cooperation between species. We treated everyone as equals, regardless of age or technological advancement." A new figure entered the chamber. An elderly human woman, wearing robes that marked her as a diplomatic representative. She walked slowly, but steadily, to join Jin at the chamber's center. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Elena Rodriguez," Jin said. First Chancellor of the Galactic Federation. Thexvar's mandibles spread in confusion. Galactic Federation? The organization that has replaced your council, Dr. Rodriguez explained. Her voice gentle but firm. Founded on principles of equality, mutual respect, and voluntary cooperation. Membership is open to any species that agrees to abide by basic standards of conduct toward their neighbors. And if we refuse to recognize this, Federation? Thexvar asked. Dr. Rodriguez smiled sadly. Then you will continue to govern the 8 systems that still acknowledge council authority. The rest of the galaxy has moved on. The systems enter. This is not possible, Thexvar insisted. Humanity was banished. You were primitives, newcomers with no right to galactic leadership. We never sought galactic leadership, Jin replied. We sought galactic partnership. You refused to offer that, so we built something better without you. The energy fields around the council members disappeared. They were free to move, but there was nowhere to go. Their authority was gone. Their fleets defeated or defected. Their civilization transformed beyond recognition. What happens now? Veltar asked quietly. Now you have a choice. Dr. Rodriguez said. You can join the Federation as equals, accepting the same rights and responsibilities as every other member species. Or you can continue to exist as independent systems, trading and cooperating with your neighbors as you see fit. And if we refuse both options, then you will be left alone, Jin said simply. The Federation does not force membership on anyone, but neither does it tolerate aggression against member species. General Krell Sox finally spoke, his voice hollow with defeat. How did you become so powerful so quickly? 2 years ago, you had no fleets, no territory outside your home system. We had something better than fleets, Admiral Chen replied. We had friends. Species that we had helped over the decades, who remembered our cooperation when you tried to force them into submission. They provided bases, resources, and intelligence, while we built the infrastructure necessary to restore galactic stability. More importantly, Jin added, we had time. 5 years of uninterrupted development while you struggled to maintain control of a crumbling system. 5 years to perfect technologies that you had dismissed as impossible. 5 years to build relationships with species that your council had ignored or oppressed. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward, extending her hand toward the council members. The offer stands open. Join us as partners in building a better galaxy, one based on cooperation rather than domination. Thexvar looked at the offered hand, then around the chamber where his once mighty council had ruled for millennia. Most of the seats were empty now, their occupants having fled to their homeworlds or joined the Federation. The galaxy had moved on without them. Slowly, the elderly Zephyrian reached out and took the human chancellor's hand. We accept, he said quietly. The council formally requests admission to the Galactic Federation. Welcome. Dr. Rodriguez replied warmly. Let's work together to build something better than what came before. As the former council members filed out of the chamber, now heading to orientation sessions for new Federation members, Jin Park stood alone in the center of the Great Hall. He thought back to his words from 5 years ago, when he had thanked the council for teaching humanity about the value of independence. They had indeed learned that lesson well. But more than that, they had learned that true strength came not from demanding submission, but from inspiring cooperation. Not from ruling others, but from serving the common good. The galaxy was finally ready to become what it had always had the potential to be. A true civilization built on the principle that every thinking being deserved dignity, respect, and the chance to reach for the stars as equals. Outside the great windows of Nexus Prime, human ships moved in formation with vessels from dozens of species, working together to build a future that none of them could have achieved alone. The age of the Galactic Council was over. The age of the Galactic Federation had begun.